My mom and dad left my little girl at the playground because I refused to pay money for my golden brother. Someone almost dragged her into a strange car with witnesses present. So I called a lawyer, and weeks later the jury said things to them that give you chills. Sup Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. I was sitting in yet another mind-numbing client presentation meeting, pretending to care about engagement metrics, while internally planning my escape from corporate hell. The meeting was dragging on endlessly, with my colleagues discussing charts and numbers that felt completely meaningless in the grand scheme of life. That's when my phone started buzzing like a wasp trapped in a jar. I glanced down and saw it was an unknown number calling. Normally, I would send that straight to voicemail without a second thought. The only people who call from unknown numbers are usually telemarketers trying to extend my car warranty or scammers from Microsoft telling me my computer has a virus. But something made me answer this time. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was just a break in routine. Is this Tyler, father of Maya? The voice on the other end was professional, but serious. My blood turned to ice. That's definitely not how phone calls about your kid are supposed to start. Every parent knows that when someone calls asking if you're so-and-so's parent, it's never followed by good news. My heart immediately started racing. Yes, that's me. Who is this? I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Officer Martinez with Miami-Dade Police Department. Your daughter is safe, but we need you to come to the station immediately. There's been an incident. The world tilted sideways. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Maya was supposed to be having a fun day with her grandma, probably getting spoiled with cookies and playground time, like every other Thursday when my mom took her for their weekly bonding session. This was supposed to be their special time together, not some emergency that required police intervention. What kind of incident? Where's my mother? I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Sir, I'd rather explain this in person. Your daughter was found alone at Ocean View Park by a citizen who prevented a potential abduction. We're at the downtown station. Potential abduction. Those words hit me like a freight train loaded with pure terror. The phrase kept echoing in my mind as I tried to process what I just heard. My 6-year-old daughter, alone in a park, nearly abducted. This couldn't be real. I don't remember leaving that conference room. I don't remember what excuse I gave my boss or how I explained my sudden departure. I just remember running through the office like John Wick on a mission, grabbing my keys and jacket while my mind spun with worst-case scenarios. Every terrible possibility flooded my thoughts as I rushed to the parking garage. The drive to the police station was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every red light felt like an eternity, and every slow driver felt like they were personally conspiring against me. I was gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white, trying to keep myself together while imagining all the horrible things that could have happened to Maya. The traffic seemed deliberately designed to torture me, each delay making my anxiety worse. When I finally burst through the station doors, I immediately spotted Maya sitting in a chair, clutching her stuffed elephant and talking to a female officer. I nearly collapsed with relief seeing her there, physically unharmed. She looked okay from a distance, but as I got closer, I could see that her eyes had this shell-shocked look that no 6-year-old should ever have. It was the kind of expression that told me something serious had happened, even if she appeared to be safe now. "Daddy!" she called out when she saw me. She jumped up and ran to me, and I caught her in a hug that probably lasted longer than the entire meeting I'd abandoned. I held her tight, feeling her small body against mine, and reassuring myself that she was really okay. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're safe now," I whispered into her hair, trying to convince both of us that everything was going to be all right. Officer Martinez approached us with an expression that immediately told me this conversation was going to ruin my entire year. It was the kind of look that experienced cops get when they have to deliver news that will fundamentally change someone's life. "Tyler, we need to talk about what happened today. Your daughter was very lucky." Lucky. That word made my stomach drop because it implied how easily things could have gone wrong. When a police officer tells you your child was lucky, it means you came dangerously close to living every parent's worst nightmare. "Jessica saved me, Daddy," Maya said, pointing to a woman sitting nearby whom I hadn't noticed in my panic. "She scared the bad man away." I looked over at this Jessica person for the first time. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with an athletic build, wearing jeans and a hoodie. But there was something about the way she carried herself that suggested she could handle business when necessary. She gave me a small wave and a smile, but I could see the concern still lingering in her eyes. "Ma'am, I can't thank you enough," I started to say, but she held up her hand. "Let's just focus on Maya right now. We can talk later. she replied, her voice calm and reassuring. Officer Martinez guided us to a private room, and she began explaining what had happened. With each detail she shared, my anger shifted from a simmer to a full, rolling boil. The story that emerged was so unbelievable, so horrifying, that I had trouble processing it at first. To understand how we ended up in this nightmare, you need to know about my family dynamic. Picture the most toxic workplace you've ever been in, multiply it by 10, add some serious mental health issues, and make it impossible to quit. That's my family in a nutshell. My mother, Linda, doesn't just think the world owes her something. She's convinced she's the queen of the universe, and everyone else exists solely to serve her needs. She has this supernatural ability to twist any situation into proof of how wrong she's been, even when she's literally the one causing all the problems. This woman could win Olympic gold in emotional manipulation, and she's perfected the art of playing the victim in every conceivable scenario. We're talking about someone who once called the police on a Burger King worker because they forgot her extra ketchup packets, claiming it was discrimination against seniors. The cops actually laughed at her, but she was dead serious about the whole thing. She genuinely believed that a teenager making minimum wage had personally conspired against her by forgetting condiments. But the real piece of work in our family is my brother Brandon. He's 2 years younger than me, but has the emotional maturity of a rabid honey badger. While I'd been working since high school, starting with washing dishes and clawing my way up to a decent marketing career, Brandon had been living the extended man-child lifestyle, funded entirely by family guilt trips and mom's relentless enabling. This dude has failed at everything he's ever touched. We're talking about 4 different colleges, 3 businesses that were basically pyramid schemes, and a credit score that would make a gambling addict look financially responsible. But here's what really makes Brandon special. He's not just irresponsible, he's genuinely unpleasant to be around. We're talking about a guy who screams at fast food workers over minor mistakes, who's been banned from 2 different gyms for starting fights, and who once threw a tantrum at Maya's birthday party because he thought his gift wasn't prominent enough in the display. The dude has this weird jealousy complex about my life and can't stand that I worked my ass off and actually made something of myself. He's the type who thinks success should just be handed to you because you exist, while his idea of networking involves hitting up family members for money while simultaneously insulting them for not giving enough. I've watched him burn bridges with literally everyone who's ever tried to help him. Former employers, friends, girlfriends. They all end up with the same story about Brandon being aggressive, entitled, and completely unable to accept responsibility for anything that goes wrong in his life. The family dynamic was always the same toxic cycle. Brandon would screw up spectacularly and blame everyone else for his failures. Mom would have a complete meltdown about how her baby boy was being persecuted by the cruel world. And somehow, I'd always end up fixing the mess because I was the successful one who could afford it. Over the years, I'd lent him money more times than I could count. There was the crypto scheme that lost $9,500. The import business that was actually just him buying knockoff electronics on eBay, and the investment opportunity that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. Each time he promised to pay me back as soon as things took off. Spoiler alert, things never took off. Looking back, I should have cut him off years ago. But there's something about family manipulation that makes you question your own sanity. They have this way of making you feel like you're the asshole for having boundaries or expecting basic respect. This time, Brandon had outdone himself. He'd been dating this girl, Victoria, for all of 4 months and decided he needed to buy a house to lock her down before she realized she could do better. The problem was that his credit was more damaged than a car in a demolition derby, so naturally he needed a co-signer. And in Brandon's tiny brain, that meant me. He showed up at my house that Sunday morning with Mom in tow, marching into my kitchen without even knocking like he owned the place. "You need to help me out with this house thing," he announced without any preamble. "Victoria's getting impatient." "Maybe try getting a stable job first," I replied, not looking up from my coffee. His face went red immediately. "That wasn't my fault. The market crashed," he said, referring to his latest employment disaster. "You want me to co-sign a house while you still owe me money from your previous schemes? I'm not doing that." What followed was 2 hours of insults, guilt trips, and barely contained rage from both of them. Mom cycled through her usual manipulation tactics, tears, accusations of abandoning family, threats about how I'd regret this decision someday. Meanwhile, Brandon alternated between victim mode and outright hostility, acting like I was personally destroying his life by refusing to enable his latest poor decision. When Maya wandered downstairs and saw Uncle Brandon yelling at me, she asked why he was being mean to Daddy. "Your dad's just being difficult about family stuff," Brandon told her, which was the moment I decided this conversation was over. I wasn't going to let him drag my 6-year-old daughter into his drama. When they finally realized I wasn't budging, Brandon stood up and got right in my face. "You're going to regret this, bro," he said, with genuine menace in his voice. "When your precious little life falls apart, don't come crying to us for help." Mom nodded along like he'd just delivered the Gettysburg Address instead of a temper tantrum from a grown man. "You'll both learn what it means to abandon family," she added, with this chilling calmness that sent shivers down my spine. They left together, and I thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, Victoria dumped Brandon via text message. According to the Family Gossip Network, she told him he was emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible, and that she couldn't see a future with someone who blamed everyone else for his problems. Brandon naturally blamed me for ruining his relationship by not co-signing the loan. Because in his world, everything that goes wrong is always someone else's fault, never his own poor choices or behavior. The week after our confrontation, things got weird. Mom went completely radio silent. No calls, no random visits, no weekend trips to spoil Maya. It was like she'd been snapped out of existence, except instead of Thanos, it was just good old-fashioned emotional manipulation. The silence was deafening and completely out of character for someone who usually called multiple times a week to check in or complain about something. Maya kept asking about Grandma, and I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her grandmother is basically holding herself hostage to prove a point? It's like trying to explain cryptocurrency to your boomer dad, technically possible, but nobody's going to be happy with the results. Brandon called me up predictably, losing his mind. "Thanks to you, Mom's a wreck," he screamed into the phone. "She can't even eat because of how much you've hurt her." Classic Brandon. In his world, I was always the villain for not enabling his Peter Pan syndrome. According to him, having money meant I was obligated to share it, like we were living in some communist fever dream where my bank account was community property. Then that Thursday happened. Mom showed up at my door like nothing had gone down, wearing this smile that would make the Joker nervous. "I want to take Maya to the park today," she announced cheerfully. "Just some grandma-granddaughter time." Maya was absolutely thrilled. She'd been asking about Grandma all week, and honestly, I was relieved that we seemed to be moving past our argument. Maybe Mom had thought it over and realized that family was more important than Brandon's latest financial disaster. Maybe she'd come to her senses. "Can we go to the park, Grandma? They have the big slide!" Maya exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. "Of course, sweetie, we'll have such a special day together," Mom replied, and something about the way she said special should have set off alarm bells in my head. But I was just a dad who wanted his family to get along. I helped Maya pack her little backpack with snacks and her stuffed elephant, gave her the usual safety lecture about staying close to Grandma, and watched them drive off. Maya was waving enthusiastically from the passenger seat, completely trusting that Grandma would keep her safe. What I didn't know was that Brandon had been blowing up Mom's phone since Victoria dumped him, screaming about how this was all my fault and demanding she do something to make me pay. He'd been drinking heavily since the breakup and was in full victim mode, ranting about how Victoria would still be with him if I had just helped him get that house. Mom had already planned everything. According to what Maya told the police later, the day started completely normal. They played on the swings, went down the slide a few times, and shared a bag of goldfish crackers. Maya was having the time of her life, completely trusting that Grandma would keep her safe and make sure nothing bad happened to her. Then around 1 p.m., Mom got a phone call from Brandon. She walked a little distance away from Maya, had a loud conversation that Maya couldn't quite make out, and came back looking upset and agitated. "Maya, sweetie, Grandma has to go help Uncle Brandon right now," she told my daughter. "You need to sit right here on this bench and wait for Daddy. He's coming to pick you up." "Where are you going, Grandma?" Maya asked, confused by the sudden change in plans. "Uncle Brandon is in trouble and needs my help," Mom explained. "But don't worry, Daddy will be here soon. Just stay right on this bench and don't move, okay? This is very important." Maya nodded because she's 6 years old and trusts adults to not be sociopaths. Mom gave her a quick hug, told her to be good, and walked away without looking back. She just walked away from a 6-year-old in a public park like she was throwing away a piece of trash. Maya sat on that bench for almost 2 hours, watching families play and have fun, while wondering why her daddy was taking so long. She didn't have a phone, didn't know our address by heart, and had been taught to stay where adults told her to stay. So she waited, clutching her stuffed elephant and trying to be the good girl that Grandma had asked her to be. That's when the predator showed up. Maya was still sitting on that bench around 2:30 p.m. when she noticed a man watching her. He'd been hanging around the playground for a while, but now he was getting closer, trying to talk to kids when their parents weren't looking. According to Maya's statement and witness accounts, this guy, later identified as Robert, a registered sex offender who'd been prowling parks for weeks, approached her with the classic predator playbook. He tried offering candy, saying he knew where her daddy was, claiming to be a police officer. Maya, bless her heart, remembered the stranger danger talks we'd had and kept refusing his help. But this piece of garbage wasn't taking no for an answer. He kept getting closer, and Maya started getting scared, clutching her elephant tighter. That's when Jessica noticed what was happening. Jessica was at the park with her sister's kids when she spotted a man who was way too interested in a little girl sitting alone. She has this background in martial arts and personal safety training, so she immediately recognized the situation for what it was. She started walking toward them, but then she saw Robert grab Maya's arm and try to pull her off the bench. Jessica didn't hesitate. She sprinted over there like she was chasing down a touchdown pass. "Hey, get your hands off her!" she shouted. Robert tried to play it off, claiming Maya was his niece who'd gotten separated from family. Maya immediately contradicted him, crying that she didn't know this man. Jessica positioned herself between Robert and Maya, and apparently her whole demeanor changed. She went from concerned bystander to someone you definitely don't want to mess with. "Step away from the child now," she commanded with absolute authority. Robert tried to intimidate her, telling her to mind her own business, but other parents started noticing the commotion. A couple of dads started walking over, cell phones already out. Robert realized his window was closing fast and made a grab for Maya one more time. But Jessica was ready. She blocked him, pushed Maya behind her, and made it very clear that he'd have to go through her first. "I'm calling the police," she announced loudly enough for half the park to hear. "Everyone get a good look at this guy." Robert finally gave up and took off running, but not before multiple people got his description and someone managed to snap a photo. Jessica immediately called 911 while comforting Maya, who was understandably freaking out about what had just happened. When the police arrived, Jessica had the whole situation handled. She'd gotten Maya calmed down, collected witness statements from other parents, and had a clear description of the would-be kidnapper. She rode with Maya to the station and stayed until I got there, making sure my daughter never felt alone or abandoned again. Meeting Jessica in that police station was like getting hit by lightning, but in a good way. Here was this woman who'd literally saved my daughter from a nightmare, and she was acting like it was just another Thursday. No dramatics, no seeking attention, just genuine concern for Maya's well-being. "Thank you" felt completely inadequate for what she'd done, but it was all I could manage without breaking down completely. "Anyone would have done the same thing," she said, but we both knew that wasn't true. Most people would have called the police and hoped for the best, but Jessica had physically intervened and put herself between a predator and my child. Maya was clinging to both of us by this point, and Officer Martinez had some hard questions about where the hell my mother was during all this. That's when I had to explain that my own mother had deliberately abandoned Maya as punishment for not enabling my brother's financial irresponsibility. Saying it out loud made it sound even more insane than it felt. "Let me get this straight," Officer Martinez said, looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Your mother left a 6-year-old alone in a public park because you wouldn't co-sign a loan?" "Exactly." The look on Jessica's face went from confusion to pure rage. "What kind of person uses a child as a weapon?" she asked, and I was about to find out that the answer was the kind of person who was about to face felony charges. While I was at the police station learning that my mother was a sociopath and Jessica was a guardian angel, the cops were already tracking down Robert. They caught him at his apartment 3 hours later, and his computer was full of exactly the kind of content you'd expect from someone who trolls parks looking for isolated kids. But that was just the beginning. Detective Chen had some serious questions about how Maya ended up alone in the first place. I explained the whole situation, the loan drama, Brandon's meltdown after Victoria dumped him, Mom's threats, her sudden appearance that morning acting weird. Detective Chen leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. "Sir, that's child endangerment at minimum. Given what almost happened, we're looking at potential felony charges." The next morning, Detective Chen called to let me know they'd obtained an arrest warrant for Mom on charges of child endangerment, child abandonment, and reckless endangerment. Given Robert's criminal history and what almost happened, the DA was pushing for felony charges. That's when I realized something important. I was done playing games with these people. If we were going full legal warfare, then it was time to collect on all debts. I called my lawyer Tom, who'd helped me with some business contracts before. I explained the situation and asked him to draft a demand letter for the $9,500 Brandon still owed me from various loans over the past 2 years. Given recent events involving my family, I want this debt collected immediately, I told him. Tom was all business about it. Turns out when your family abandons your kid and nearly gets her kidnapped, judges tend to be very unsympathetic to deadbeat relatives claiming, "But we're family," as a defense for not paying debts. Sir, given the circumstances, I think we have a strong case for immediate collection, Tom explained. Your brother's behavior and his family's actions constitute a breach of the implied good faith in these loan agreements. We can demand full payment within 30 days or face legal action. Do it. The demand letter was delivered to Brandon's apartment via certified mail 3 days later. It was beautifully written legal language that basically said, "Pay up or get sued, you deadbeat piece of shit." Tom had crafted it with the perfect balance of professional courtesy and underlying threat that made it clear this wasn't a request. Brandon called me that night, absolutely losing his mind. He was drunk, slurring his words and screaming about how I was trying to destroy the family. The irony was completely lost on him that he was accusing me of destroying something that had already blown itself up through their own actions. I explained that I had documentation of every loan, including his promises to repay them, and that paying back money you borrowed isn't theft. It's basic human decency. I don't have $9 grand just sitting around, he whined, as if his poor financial planning was somehow my problem. Then you should have thought about that before participating in a plan that could have gotten Maya kidnapped, I replied coldly. I didn't participate in anything. That was all Mom's idea, he protested. But his voice had that nervous edge that told me he knew he was caught. You're the one who demanded she teach me a lesson for not co-signing your loan. You think I don't know about your phone calls to her? Silence. Then nervous stammering as he realized Mom had confessed everything when the police questioned her. She'd thrown him under the bus faster than you could say, family loyalty. 2 weeks later, Brandon called back sounding completely defeated. I got the money, he said quietly. All of it? Yeah, all of it. I had to sell my car and some other stuff, but I got it. The wire transfer came through the next day, $9,500, exactly what he owed me. For the first time in years, I was completely paid back by my deadbeat brother. Jessica was at my house when I got the bank notification. We were making dinner while Maya played in the living room, and this domestic scene felt more natural than anything I'd experienced with my biological family in years. You actually got the money back? She asked, reading the bank alert over my shoulder. Every penny. Turns out legal pressure works better than family guilt trips, I said with satisfaction. How does it feel? She asked. Honestly, pretty damn good. I've been enabling his irresponsibility for years, and he finally had to face consequences. Jessica had brought Maya a children's book about brave girls and a small stuffed giraffe to keep the elephant company. Maya acted like Christmas had come early, and we ordered pizza for an impromptu dinner party where Maya regaled Jessica with stories about her school friends and her favorite movies. Watching them bond was like watching a missing piece of our family puzzle click into place. Maya was laughing and animated in a way I hadn't seen since before the park incident, and Jessica was patient and engaged with every silly 6-year-old story. After Maya went to bed, Jessica and I sat on the couch talking about everything and nothing. She was a teacher, had grown up in a stable family that actually solved problems instead of creating them, and had this calming presence that made me remember what normal felt like. I keep thinking about what could have happened, I said, the weight of the day finally hitting me. But it didn't. Maya's safe, the bad guy is in jail, your mother is facing consequences, and you got your money back, she replied pragmatically. What if you hadn't been there? Someone else would have helped. I have to believe that. You saved my daughter's life. You would have done the same thing. Maybe I would have, but I knew I was falling for the woman who'd literally saved my family. Meanwhile, Brandon had been getting worse since paying me back. The loss of his car and having to liquidate his possessions to pay his debt had been the final straw in his already fragile mental state. He'd been fired from his latest job for showing up drunk, had gotten into a bar fight that resulted in another arrest, and was basically spiraling into full-blown alcoholism. That's when Aunt Patricia decided to join the party. 2 months later, we were sitting in a courtroom that looked like the world's most depressing family reunion. Mom's side was packed with relatives who'd bought into her victim narrative. Aunt Patricia sat front and center with a Bible in her lap, while various cousins and Brandon looked like someone had personally insulted their mothers. Patricia is Mom's older sister and has always been her biggest enabler. She's also one of those religious people who uses Bible verses like weapons and thinks being Christian gives her the right to judge everyone else's decisions. She'd been running a full propaganda campaign during those 2 months, calling every relative, family friend, and church member to convince them that I was a demonic son who was persecuting his innocent mother. My side was basically just me, Jessica, and the cold, hard truth. The prosecution started with Officer Martinez's testimony about finding Maya and the initial investigation. Then Detective Chen explained how they'd tracked down Robert and what they'd found on his computer. The prosecutor was crystal clear in her opening statement. The defendant's actions directly enabled a registered sex offender to access her granddaughter. This wasn't negligence. It was a calculated decision that put a child in mortal danger. During the break, Patricia cornered me in the hallway with her Bible clutched to her chest. She started quoting verses about honoring thy father and mother, about forgiveness, about love being patient and kind. When I mentioned that I'd shown kindness to my daughter by protecting her from abandonment, she escalated to using guilt trip verses to manipulate me. "You're destroying a 68-year-old woman's life over a few hours," she said with righteous indignation. "And now you've stolen money from Brandon too." "I didn't steal anything from Brandon. I collected money he legally owed me," I replied firmly. "Money that was given in love between brothers," she countered. "You should give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. But you turned Christian charity into worldly greed." When Jessica took the stand, she was incredible. Professional, clear, and absolutely devastating to Mom's defense. She testified about observing Maya sitting alone for approximately 30 minutes before Robert's approach, about the child being clearly distressed and completely vulnerable when the predator made his move. During cross-examination, Mom's lawyer tried to shake her testimony, but she held firm on every detail. Meanwhile, Patricia was praying loudly enough that the bailiff had to tell her to quiet down. The most damaging testimony came from the child psychologist who'd been working with Maya. The minor exhibits classic symptoms of abandonment trauma compounded by the terror of a near abduction, she explained to the court. She suffers from severe separation anxiety and has difficulty trusting that caregivers won't suddenly disappear. That's when Patricia completely lost it. She stood up in the middle of the courtroom and started shouting, "This is persecution of the righteous! You're all bearing false witness against an innocent woman!" The judge ordered her removed from the courtroom. As the bailiff escorted her out, she was screaming about false accusers and the persecution of the faithful, making a scene that probably damaged Mom's case even more. When Mom finally took the stand, she came dressed like she was auditioning for the role of sympathetic grandmother in a Lifetime movie. She wore a conservative dress, minimal makeup, and had this carefully practiced expression of wounded innocence that she'd probably been rehearsing in the mirror. The prosecutor destroyed her during cross-examination, systematically getting her to admit that she'd abandoned her granddaughter to handle the exact same loan issue that had caused the entire conflict in the first place. Under questioning, Mom was forced to acknowledge that she'd deliberately left Maya alone, that she'd told Maya to wait for me when she knew I wasn't coming, and that she'd done all of this as retaliation for my refusal to enable Brandon's latest scheme. The judge was an older woman with decades of family court experience and zero patience for bullshit. During closing arguments, she looked like she'd already made up her mind about the case. Her expression was stern and unmoved by the defense's attempts to portray this as a family misunderstanding. "I've reviewed all testimony and evidence in this case," the judge began, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "The facts are clear." Mom straightened up in her chair, probably expecting some speech about family forgiveness and second chances. Instead, what came next would haunt her forever. The defendant deliberately abandoned a minor child in a public location as retaliation against the child's father. This action directly led to the child being targeted by a predator and nearly resulted in abduction. The courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop as everyone waited for the verdict. "Linda, your actions were not those of a confused grandmother making an innocent mistake. They were calculated, deliberate, and showed a complete disregard for your granddaughter's safety and well-being. Therefore, this court finds you guilty of felony child endangerment, child abandonment, and reckless endangerment." The courtroom held its breath. "Given the serious nature of these crimes and their potential consequences, I sentence you to 2 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation." She looked Mom dead in the eye and delivered the words that would echo in that courtroom forever. "You do not deserve to be a grandmother." The courtroom exploded. Brandon started yelling about injustice, relatives were crying, and Mom just sat there looking like someone had slapped her with a reality check she never saw coming. Additionally, I'm ordering a permanent restraining order preventing any contact with the minor victim, and restitution in the amount of $85,000 for psychological treatment and damages. As we left the courthouse, Patricia was waiting outside with a group of church ladies holding signs about religious persecution and protecting Christian families. She tried to block our path, screaming about God's judgment and how I'd stolen money from my brother in his time of need. Jessica stepped between us without hesitation. "Ma'am, you need to back off," she said firmly. Security had to escort Patricia and her prayer group away from the courthouse. Justice had been served, and I'd collected every penny I was owed. Sometimes accountability actually works. 6 months after the trial, life had completely transformed. Maya was thriving in therapy and had bounced back with that incredible resilience that kids somehow manage to summon. She still had occasional nightmares, but they were getting less frequent, and she developed this amazing bond with Jessica that was beautiful to watch. Jessica and I had been dating for 4 months by then, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She'd moved in 3 weeks earlier after Maya asked if she could stay forever. We'd taken things slow out of respect for Maya's trauma and my own trust issues, but everything about our relationship just worked seamlessly. "Daddy, can Jessica be my new grandma?" Maya asked one Saturday morning while we were making pancakes together. Jessica nearly choked on her coffee. "Sweetheart, I'm not old enough to be a grandma," she laughed. "But you take care of me better than Grandma ever did," Maya replied, with that brutal honesty that only children possess. Kids have a way of cutting right to the heart of things, and Maya's observation was painfully accurate. Mom was serving her sentence and had tried to contact me several times through various intermediaries, but the restraining order was crystal clear about no contact. Patricia had also been sending letters full of Bible verses about prodigal sons and forgiveness, which I threw away without reading. I had no interest in more manipulation disguised as religious guidance. Brandon, meanwhile, had completely lost his shit after paying me back. The loss of his car and having to liquidate his possessions to pay his debt had been the final straw in his already fragile mental state. He'd gone on a 3-week bender that ended with him getting arrested for DUI after crashing his borrowed car into a mailbox. He'd been evicted from his apartment and was basically couch surfing between relatives who were getting tired of his bullshit. Jessica's family had been incredible throughout everything. Her parents were these warm, functional people who communicated like adults and solved problems without emotional warfare. Maya was getting her first taste of what healthy family relationships looked like, and she was absolutely thriving in that environment. "You know what I love about your family?" I told Jessica one night after a barbecue at her parents' house. "What's that?" "Nobody's trying to manipulate, guilt trip, or emotionally blackmail anyone else. You guys just actually like each other." "Revolutionary concept, right?" she said with a smile. We'd been talking about marriage tentatively, the way you discuss important things when there's a 6-year-old involved. Maya had made it clear she approved of the arrangement, and Jessica had proven she was in this for the long haul. The night I proposed, Maya was in on the plan. We'd gone to the same park where Jessica had saved her. It had been transformed from a place of trauma into a symbol of new beginnings. Maya found the ring box during a treasure hunt game and presented it to Jessica with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "Will you marry us?" Maya asked, because apparently we were a package deal. Jessica was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry both of you," she said, pulling us both into a hug. The engagement was going perfectly until 3 weeks later, when Brandon decided to make his final play. I was coming home from work on a Thursday evening when I saw him standing in my driveway, clearly drunk and angrier than I'd ever seen him. He must have been waiting for a while because Jessica's car wasn't there. She'd taken Maya to her dance class. "There's my piece of shit, brother," he slurred as I got out of my car. "Living the perfect life while Mom rots in prison and I'm homeless." "Brandon, you're drunk. Go home," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and non-confrontational. "Home? What home? I lost everything because you had to collect your freaking debt like some loan shark," he spat, swaying on his feet and holding a beer bottle. He was blocking my path to the front door, and I could tell this wasn't going to be a rational conversation. What followed was a drunken rant about how I had destroyed the family, stolen his money, and ruined his life. He was getting more agitated by the minute, waving the bottle around and making increasingly aggressive threats about teaching me what it felt like to lose everything. "Are you threatening me?" I asked directly, wanting to be absolutely clear about what was happening. "I'm promising you," he said, with genuine menace in his voice. "Maybe something should happen to your perfect little life. Maybe someone should take something away from you for once." That's when I realized he wasn't just drunk. He was completely unhinged. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was a potentially dangerous situation involving someone who had nothing left to lose. "Brandon, you need to leave now," I said firmly. "Or what? You'll call the cops like you did on Mom?" he sneered. When I pulled out my phone, he completely snapped. He threw the beer bottle at my car, shattering the rear window, and started screaming like a maniac about how I'd stolen his money and destroyed his life. His voice was so loud that neighbors started coming out of their houses to see what was happening. The police arrived 8 minutes later to find Brandon sitting on my front steps, crying and mumbling about how unfair everything was. He was so drunk, he could barely stand up when they tried to talk to him. They arrested him for public intoxication, disturbing the peace and destruction of property. 2 days later, Brandon appeared in court for his DUI case. The judge sentenced him to 6 months in jail, loss of his license for 2 years, and mandatory alcohol counseling. When he got out, he found the restraining order waiting for him. Meanwhile, Patricia had escalated her own campaign of harassment. She'd been calling my workplace trying to get church members to pressure me, and had even shown up at Maya's school claiming to be family. The school administration had been briefed about the situation and immediately called me when she appeared. The final hearing for both restraining orders was almost anticlimactic. Brandon showed up looking like he'd been living under a bridge, still blaming everyone else for his problems. He told the judge I'd systematically destroyed our family, had our mother imprisoned, stolen money from him when he was at his lowest point, and was now trying to silence him for speaking the truth. Patricia came dressed like she was going to a funeral and ready to quote scripture about forgiveness and family loyalty. She claimed I'd turned my back on God's commandments and was persecuting my own family for standing by Christian values, even using worldly courts to steal money from my brother in his time of need. The judge looked at the police reports, witness statements, and video evidence from my security cameras. "Brandon, you threatened your brother's family, destroyed his property, and demonstrated clear signs of substance abuse and emotional instability. The debt collection was legal and legitimate. Paying back money you borrowed is not theft. This restraining order is granted for a period of 5 years. Patricia, your harassment of this family, including attempts to contact the minor child at school and interfering with the father's workplace, constitutes stalking behavior. You are also prohibited from any contact for 5 years. Just like that, the last toxic pieces of my family were legally removed from our lives. A year later, Jessica officially adopted Maya. The hearing was just a formality. She'd been Maya's mom in every way that mattered since that day in the park. When the judge signed the papers, Maya started crying happy tears. "Now it's official! I have the best mom ever," she said, hugging Jessica tightly. We had a small wedding 6 months later, just close friends and Jessica's family. Maya was the flower girl and took her job very seriously, practicing her walk down the aisle for weeks beforehand. The ceremony was everything I'd never known I wanted. Simple, genuine, and surrounded by people who actually cared about our happiness. Maya's happy and healthy now, surrounded by people who actually deserve to be called family. She knows the story about how Jessica saved her, but to Maya, that's just how they met. Jessica isn't the woman who rescued her from a predator. She's just Mom, the person who helps with homework, makes her favorite snacks, and reads bedtime stories. Sometimes I get updates about my biological family through the grapevine. Mom gets out next year, but the restraining orders will still be in effect. Brandon's been in and out of jail for various alcohol-related incidents and is basically homeless, bouncing between shelters and whatever relatives will still tolerate him. Patricia is apparently telling everyone at her church that I'm possessed by demons and asking for prayers to cast out the evil spirits that made me turn against my family. I used to feel guilty about how everything turned out. Like maybe I should have tried harder to help them, or found some way to keep the family together despite their dysfunction. But then I look at Maya, confident, happy, surrounded by people who love her unconditionally. And I know I made the right choices. Real family doesn't threaten you when you set boundaries. Real love doesn't use children as weapons. Real relationships don't require you to sacrifice your well-being to maintain them. Maya's about to become a big sister. Jessica's pregnant with our second kid, and Maya's absolutely thrilled to teach the baby everything important. She's already planning lessons about stranger danger, the importance of telling trusted adults when something's wrong, and how to identify the difference between people who love you and people who just want to manipulate you. Smart kid. She's going to be an amazing big sister. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that sometimes the worst moments in your life can lead to the best outcomes. If my mother hadn't abandoned Maya that day, I never would have met Jessica. Maya never would have learned what real family looks like. We never would have built this incredible life together. I'm not grateful for the trauma Maya experienced, and I'll never forgive what my biological family put us through. But I am grateful for the strength it revealed in all of us, and for the way it led us to the people who truly belong in our lives. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life isn't about punishment or revenge. Sometimes it's just about making room for the people who actually deserve to be there. Maya deserves a grandmother who would never use her as a weapon. She deserves uncles who celebrate her achievements instead of resenting them. She deserves a family that protects her, not one that puts her in danger to prove a point. And now she has all of that. We all do.